Salutations to the nations. It's your boy Young Sinai.
Angel Knot.
All right, so we're going to be checking out a couple of things, you know what I'm saying? All right, so everybody know that these Nintendo Switch 2 game prices are astronomical, okay? I don't think nobody feeling these prices. For real, for real. You know, I was watching earlier the live, and all you could see going down the live was these prices, or drop the prices, drop the prices, drop the prices. So I see RGT85 made a video about the situation as well. So let's check it out, see what he got to say. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Got very close to his beard there. Okay, let's go ahead and check this out.
So yesterday was, of course, Nintendo's big day with the Nintendo Switch 2 unveiling. We saw system features, games, all sorts of fun stuff. Of course, not everyone is going to like every single thing, but overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this presentation. I was very pleased with the way that the games look, how the games will perform.
Yeah, I was very excited about everything. Everything looked on point until speculation started coming out about the prices for the games. Then everything was like, wow, that really kind of changes things
In terms of what the Switch 2 is capable of, and I think the additional system features are very nice. Yes, the system is a bit pricey at $449 or $499 with Mario Kart World attached to it, but I feel like with the specs that you're getting, especially when you compare it to something like the handheld mini PCs that are on the marketplace, I think the system is right in line with what it should cost, maybe even a bit on the lower end of the spectrum, especially when you consider comparing it to something like a ROG Ally X or something like that, which could cost nearly double the price of a Switch 2. Of course, though, there was lots of conversation that we ended up talking about in another video yesterday on the channel around the price of Mario Kart World. Lots of misinformation was floating around because, I mean, it's the internet, but I don't think Nintendo really understood the size and scope of people that were going to have a problem with Mario Kart World being an $80 game until the Treehouse presentation today. Nintendo did an in-depth look at games such as the aforementioned Mario Kart World, Metroid Prime 4, Donkey Kong Bonanza, and honestly, these games all look great. These games all look very...
But do they look $80 to $90 great? That's the question we gotta ask. Because when you just see it with no price, you're like, oh yeah, this look good. But when you got that $80 microscope that you put in everything under, now we gotta see, is this worth $80?
Advanced. They all have very impressive visuals and effects going on and lighting effects going on. It's pure eye candy to see this, especially coming to us from Nintendo. And you would think that that's what the chat would be talking about in the YouTube live chat for the Treehouse.
Chat was going nuts. I'm not exaggerating. If you saw it, you know, chat was going crazy. I probably saw everybody saying drop the price, and it will be like 1 out of 100 people who would say something different.
House presentation, everyone would be talking about, oh, these games look so cool, these games look so awesome, but no, nobody's talking about that. Instead, they're talking about the price of Nintendo Switch 2 games on a case-by-case basis, and Nintendo's...
Lucky, when you edit this, I want you to put the file of that I screen recorded showing all of the people who were saying drop the price, drop the price, drop the price, so that people can really understand how people are not rocking with this price.
Switch 1 upgraded versions on the Nintendo Switch 2 as well, because there's lots of confusion. There's lots of commotion about this. Prices seem to be all over the place. So I kind of want to talk about what is going on with this, clear up some misconceptions that are floating around out there as well, and try to come to some sort of, understanding of why this is happening. So, Mario Kart World was reported as being $80 digital, $90 physical. And while in some regions that is the case, if you live in the United States, that is not the case. And, shout outs to other countries out there and stuff like that. I like you guys. You guys are cool. I live in the United States, so I'm only focusing on prices here, prices that will impact me. So no, there is no $90 physical edition of the game. The digital cost of the game is $80 and the physical cost of the game is $80. People also like to point to tariffs potentially raising the price.
$80 still a lot for a game. I mean, it's $10 less than 90, but $80 is still a lot. I thought he was gonna drop a gem or like drop a bomb. I thought he was to say, no, it's actually $60. I was like, oh, okay. Or it's actually $70. I was like, oh, okay. But no, I mean, $80 still expensive.
Of these games. And once again, I think that's a false equivalency. I'm not an economic expert, and I do understand that tariffs are rapidly changing in the United States. But when you see Donkey Kong Bonanza,
you know what I think? You know what this? You know what this reminds me of? Y'all know Pokimane? When she had her cookies, and she was like, if you're a broke boy, just say you're a broke boy." I feel like that's how Nintendo's treating its fans. Like, look, if you're broke, just say you're broke. You can't afford the game. I'm broke.
as a $70 game, but Mario Kart World is an $80 game. To me, that doesn't scream tariff. To me, that screams calculated decision. This is a business decision by Nintendo to increase the price of the game. And I'm sure they're not going to say why all of a sudden a game is jumping up to $80, but this doesn't scream, an economic situation to me. If anything, you would see it more so on the hardware side of things. And when you look at the hardware, like I said earlier, I think it's competitively priced. Of course, if you are in Japan, it's actually a lot cheaper to buy a region-locked Japanese system. I kind of see that as a loyalty thing more so than anything else, though, because once again, other regions that aren't going through tariff changes right now aren't seeing a dramatic difference in the price comparative to other systems that are on the market.
Man, that game looked crazy, man. I'm not even a huge Mario Kart fan. Like, I like Mario Kart, like the next guy, but I never been like, oh man, I really gotta play Mario Kart. But this game looks crazy, especially a free roam.
Marketplace.
They gonna end up getting my $80. Man, I can't stand Nintendo.
And other games that are on the marketplace. I really think this is just a business decision by Nintendo, and people are unhappy about it. People are genuinely upset about this. And I mean, I can't say that they're necessarily wrong. And I think there's a myriad of reasons that people are upset about this. And really, the main one to me has to be what Nintendo's vision has always kind of been. They've always been, a cheaper alternative to other platforms. And you could compare, the N64, PS1, Sega Saturn era and say, well, look, this is when Nintendo games were at their highest, and you could buy games on the PlayStation 1 or the Sega Saturn for cheaper. And you would be 100% correct, but that was a different time. It was because of manufacturing costs to actually produce those cartridges. It's kind of a false equivalency in my opinion. And then when you compare the price of the N64 to something like the Sega Saturn, to something like the PlayStation 1, you got an extended value in buying the system at a lower price point. Of course, the video game industry was a much smaller industry at that time. A game that sold 5 million was considered to be absolutely mind-blowing, and now you can sell 5 million and it's considered a flop. So,
and that's kind of like the opposite of the music industry, because the music industry, you could sell 1 million and you go on platinum. If you sold 500,000, like, people were laughing at you. But like now, because of streaming and everything, when you sell 500,000, it's like, oh man, that did incredible. So it's crazy how the industries, it's not crazy, but it's interesting how the industries are different.
Oh, it kind of goes back on what Nintendo's main priority has been ever since they entered into like the GameCube era. You know, cheaper games, cheaper systems, you know, being the value budgeted customer option for people. And to see them being the one to take the leap to an $80 standard edition of a game is very jarring. You know, I think a lot of people are starting.
And you know something else that I just thought about? Because as I've been thinking about the Switch too, I've just been thinking about buying it for myself. But there's people who have kids. I have kids too. But there's people who are going to be buying this for their kids, right? And it's already expensive having a kid. And it's people out there who are single parents who have kids. And their kid is going to want this, okay? And to not be able to, this is kind of like the point that, I just did a interview with Valentine, and but he was kind of making this point too. But it's going to be people who want to play these games, kids who want to play these games and want to share those experiences with people at school, and then they're not going to have it because it is freaking expensive. It is expensive. And Nintendo specifically is a company that caters towards kids. So it's just putting people in a real bind because times are already hard. Like people are trying to figure out how they're going to get eggs. Like somebody in the comments, when I was looking at it, they were like, we're trying to figure out how we're going to live. And you're charging $80 for a game, $90 for a game, allegedly. So yeah, there's just
Starting to make equivalencies to, you know, the 3DS with this, where when the 3DS came out, prices were high on things, and Nintendo was forced to kind of pivot, do the ambassadors program with this, and so on and so forth to kind of recorrect history. And I mean, that's a thing to consider as well. But it's just weird to me to see how all over the place the prices of things already are. You know, Mario Kart World is a game that is $80. But Donkey Kong Country or Donkey Kong Bonanza is a $70 game. And these are both first party games. And then you have a game such as Street Fighter 6 that's a $60 game. And yes, that is a third party game, but still, like, why is that $60? And then you have a game like Cyberpunk 2077, which is $70, but Cyberpunk is all on the 64 gigabyte cartridge. So obviously that's going to cost a little bit more to manufacture than versus something like Street Fighter, which
yeah, these prices are all over the place. Like it's just like they were just they just had a dartboard and were just throwing darts at what they were going to charge, what price they were going to charge for different games.
is $60, but you have to download most of the game onto the system because the card is just sort of the digital card. The mixed messaging for a lot of this stuff, I think, is going to be a little bit problematic. You and I understand it. You know, you're an educated.
No, I don't understand it. I'm sorry, RGT 85. You're a lot smarter than me. I don't understand why this game's $80.
Person. You watch this channel, and I thank you for that because you
You're welcome. And thank you for everyone who's watching this channel.
watching is.
And I want to say something. I gotta explain something to you guys. Cause somebody commented, and I was just gonna let it be, but I just want to make things clear. Somebody commented on a video that I reacted to RGT 85, and they're like, I don't understand why you're doing this video if you're just agreeing with what he's saying, and why are you just letting him talk and for long periods of time? Like, you should be saying something. Dude, if I agree with the dude, I agree with them. Like, I'm not going to keep cutting him off. I'm going to let him make his point, and I'm not making a video just to argue with somebody and be controversial. I'm making it because I like this creator and I find what he says interesting, and I can also share my viewpoint, and hopefully you all think it's interesting. So I don't make videos like this to go back and forth, okay? So I just want to make that clear and clear it up for those who don't understand reaction videos in 2025.
Going to help me afford all this crap. But you watch this channel, so you kind of understand the general consumer. I don't know how they're going to, because we haven't even really hit the general consumer. The people that are talking and writing articles and talking about this in YouTube chats and on social media, they're not really the general consumer. The general consumer is the person that doesn't really use social media, isn't on the internet all the time, isn't watching YouTube all the time, is the parent or the person that's going to walk into a store, see a new Nintendo system and see an $80 game and be like, well, what the hell is that? When did games become $80? Now, of course, you could go into the whole inflation situation and stuff. Well, games should cost more. And people will seem to die on that hill. I think that's a conversation for another day because once again, it's a false equivalency, and I just don't see it because of the size and scope of the video game industry, the ways that distribution has changed as well, the amount of copies games sell versus how they would sell back then, which I already mentioned with a game, selling 5 million copies. But it's a hard pill to swallow. And initially, the Switch 2 is going to sell out. The games are going to sell out. It's going to go like hotcakes. I'm more interested in 6 months from the release of the system. Is that game still going to be $80 Mario Kart World? And then you have the whole thing with the upgrade
I feel like, yeah, because Nintendo doesn't really drop the prices of their games for real.
games. That's a whole nother confusing thing in and of itself, because if you have the
I don't think so. If I'm wrong, correct me.
expansion pack, you get some upgraded games for free that are just visual upgrades. But if it adds story content, like they're selling Kirby the Forgotten Land for $80 because of the fact that the base game is $60 on the Nintendo Switch and they're charging $20 for the upgrade that includes additional story content. I don't know, man. I don't know. It seems very weird to me. It seems very weird to me, and I guess it's an option. You could pick up a used copy of Kirby and the Forgotten Land and then just pay the $20 upgrade that has the additional content, and then you're kind of good to go. But it seems a little convoluted. It seems a little bit confusing, especially for the average customer who isn't really following all of this stuff, isn't really in tune with the internet and video games and online culture. And I'm very interested to see how this pans out. I'm not going to tell you to buy a game or buy a system if you don't want to buy it. Obviously, I'm going to buy it because of my job. And I'm going to buy all the games because of my job, because I need to show you guys how the games look, how the games perform. And luckily, with your views, you have put me in a position to be able to comfortably be able to afford all this stuff. But
All right. Yep. So he pretty much made, his point, in my opinion. I'm gonna go ahead and hop off here. I have a headache. I appreciate you tuning in. Thank you. But yeah, you have a great night. God bless and salutations to the nations. Peace. Angel Knot.